Good evening, everyone. I know I haven't made a video recently, but I still wanted to talk about a very interesting but niche project that I've been working on for the past few days. I'm making an audiobook. The audiobook in question is Century of Conflict by William Neal and his grandson, William Alfred Neal. For a little bit of context, William Neal was the first Anglo settler to live here in my hometown, Brownsville, Texas. I say that it's niche. This is a niche sort of project because if you're not well versed in Brownsville's history or South Texas history, some of the events in this book might not fully make sense to you. Regardless, if you could appreciate a good Western type of story that are actual events, or if you appreciate mid 19th century first-hand historical accounts, or if you like good storytelling from the 1800s that's perfectly readable today and enjoyable today, give Century of Conflict a chance, more especially if you live in South Texas or Brownsville, Texas. You won't regret it. Why an audiobook? Well, first off, Century of Conflict is an extremely rare book to come across. I am privileged to own a copy. It was a miracle that I found this book on the internet, sold for $3. It's worth at least 3,000, in my opinion. I'm biased, of course. Secondly, the publishing company that owned it no longer exists. It's owned by another group, and when I called them to see whether or not I can do this sort of project, they said, well, the people with the rights no longer exist, so there's no one to ask permission to. Assuming that's right, there's nothing legally stopping me from making this audiobook. Yay! Just to give y'all a sneak peek of what's going on here, William Neal and his grandson William Alfred Neal, they wrote down a dozen or so vignettes of what life was like when Brownsville, Texas rose out of the dirt to become a formal civilization. Let's table of contents real quick. Some of the chapters include stories about William Neal's crazy origin story about how he, as a teenage runaway, hopped on a boat in England, headed here to this particular area of the New World, but he got involved in the Mexican War for Independence. There was cannonballs being shot towards his face, and it's basically a teenage pirate story. It's very fun. There's also talks about the local indigenous tribes, legends of pirate treasure that may be hidden out on South Padre Island. Several interesting scuffles and fights and bandit raids that happen here. I believe there's a railroad robbery, the Rio Grande Railroad robbery on page 125. Be on the lookout for that one. I really only had a couple of difficulties in making this audiobook. First off, I'm an introvert. I'm normally not that much of a talker. It is exhausting talking an hour or two on end recording this. It doesn't look like it's a big book, but I predict it's going to be 6-7 hours long upon completion. The thing is, I don't want to read past through it. I want to read aloud in the same intonation that William Neal would have said these phrases. Which brings me to my second difficulty in reading this book aloud. Some of the phrases in question, especially regarding Indigenous Americans and African Americans, would not be appropriate if said in 2021. The one slur he does say quite a bit is the word squaw, Squaw, W. You never want to say that word to refer to an indigenous woman. Still, the Neils use it quite a bit throughout the chapters that talk about indigenous cultures. Still, I don't want to get rid of that word or censor that word or bleep that word because it would detract from the historical context that this book came from. It came from the 1850s. It did not come from 2021, obviously. Though those types of phrases really come far and in between within the contents of this book, no, I still feel the need to just read them aloud as it is, because taking them away would be to deny that they existed in the first place. Regardless, Century of Conflict, it is jam-packed with action, adventure, drama, romance about the early life of Brownsville, Texas, as it rose from the dirt to become a formal civilization. I may or may not have said that already, but it's tired. It's almost 2 a.m. But I wanted to make a quick update video on what project I've been working on recently. Century of Conflict. If you are into Brownsville history, South Texas history, or would like to become interested in Brownsville history or the South Texas history, or you appreciate a good Western type of story that is actually based on true events, that are true events, Century of Conflict, coming soon on Professor Gigs, the audiobook. With that I say, have a good one, take care, kick ass.